Backyard Science. My name is Marilyn. I work at the Marina branch of the Monterey County Free Libraries, and today we will be learning a little bit more about our Monterey Bay backyard. Continuing on from the last episode where we did flashing phytoplankton, I thought it might be fun to learn about the unique geology of the bay that supports our local marine ecosystem. So I know we hear a lot about whale watching in Monterey, but one of the coolest things about Monterey isn't biological but geological. Geology is the study of the physical structures of the earth rather than the biological ones. You might not know this, but in our Monterey Bay backyard there is a geological feature called the Monterey Canyon. The Monterey Canyon bisects the bay almost straight down the middle, and it begins only about 2 kilometers offshore of Elkhorn Slough, in the very middle of the bay. So if you're looking at it like this, it's kind of a crescent. Santa Cruz is up here, Monterey's down here, and the canyon starts here and goes out. This canyon is almost a mile deep in some places, and its dimensions are comparable to the Grand Canyon, which you've probably heard of. Just, underwater. That's why it's called submarine. Here is a video from the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, or MBARI, that shows what this canyon looks like underwater using data from years of research and mapping. Take a look.
The beautiful blue waters of Monterey Bay lies a geological feature as majestic as the Grand Canyon. Just offshore of MBARI in Moss Landing, California, Monterey Canyon provides our researchers quick access to the deep ocean and the chance to observe the amazing creatures that live there. If we were to drain Monterey Bay, we would see the main canyon channel meandering for over 470 kilometers. It's roughly 12 kilometers at its widest point. The canyon walls reach a maximum height of about 1,700 meters. MBARI researchers use AUVs, autonomous underwater vehicles, to explore and map the canyon. The AUV data shown here is 1 meter resolution. Monterey Canyon eventually ends on the abyssal plain at a depth of 4,000 meters. It is the largest submarine canyon on the Pacific coast, and MBARI is incredibly lucky to call it our backyard.
Pretty cool, huh? Now, the upshot of the Monterey Bay Canyon in our bay backyard is that researchers can reach deep sea habitats with very little boat time, giving them more time to research not only the physical and geological processes that create and continue to affect the canyon today, but also the many creatures that use it. By contrast, on the East Coast, with the flat kind of plain that goes out from that shore, researchers sometimes have to travel for hours and hours and hours, and sometimes days, to get to any kind of deep sea habitat. So our researchers here in Monterey Bay are very fortunate to be able to see all of these really cool creatures in their natural habitat. Now, some cool facts about the canyon. The main part of the Monterey Canyon goes over 470 kilometers, or about 292 miles offshore. It is about 12 kilometers or 7.5 miles at its widest point, and it is up to a mile high in the main part of it. It also ends at a depth greater than 4,000 meters at the end of the Monterey Deep Sea Fan, which is about 2.5 miles, and it ends on the abyssal plain of the seafloor, out past the north and south shores of the mouth of Monterey Bay. It may be the size of the Grand Canyon, but unlike the Grand Canyon, which was formed by the continuous movement of the Colorado River, our canyon was created by sediment, which is basically dirt, but it's underwater. And this sediment was carried by currents from both up from the south of Monterey and down from the south of Santa Cruz, around the shore and to the mouth. And at that point, triggers such as storm waves or fault activity, like earthquakes and things, create these underwater avalanches of which mix that sediment with the seawater, and it creates this slurry, and that gets carried from the mouth of the canyon out into it to the seafloor, and it is carried seaward in what is called a turbidity current. Now, water is turbid when it is disturbed, so that's why it is a turbidity current. But these turbidity currents over millions and millions of years created the canyon that we know and love today, and they continue to shape it even if we can't see it in real time, because it takes place over hundreds and thousands of years. Now, how do we find all this out? MBARI and a variety of other underwater research institutions around the world use a variety of remotely operated and pre-programmed vehicles, like this autonomous underwater vehicle, or AUV, that is programmed and then sent out into the ocean to gather data, and also remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs. These instruments have a lot of different data collecting equipment on them, but the main thing that they use to map the seafloor is sonar. Sonar is when the instrument sends out pings of sound waves, and the sound waves go through the water and bounce off of any irregular object and come back to create a picture, much like we talked about in bats in our bat video. So we know that this canyon is this really important feature of Monterey Bay, and we know that it supports a really huge amount of biodiversity, which is the amount of species and variety of species of creatures. But if it's so deep, how do the creatures down there get food? Well, it is a general rule in the ocean that irregularities breed biodiversity. So if you imagine a flat seafloor, there isn't going to be very many creatures that can live on it. The biodiversity is going to be very low. But the second that you have any kind of crevice or rock, that immediately creates more places for organisms to evolve and to live on. So organisms can burrow between the rock and the sediment, they can maybe hide around it, they can maybe even burrow into it, like sea fan tube worms and things. So you can imagine that a big feature like the canyon creates a lot of biodiversity because of the depth and because of all the little crevices and things and sediment that are present. So even though we have this really great geological feature, it extends very deeply below the ocean. Now, we learned in our flashing phytoplankton video that plankton, which are basically the basis of all marine ecosystems, as well as a huge oxygen producer for us, mostly lives near the surface where the sunlight is present, because many of them use energy from the sun to photosynthesize, or they eat the organisms that do the photosynthesizing. The sunlight drops off pretty quickly at around 200 meters in the ocean water column, which leaves a lot of ocean below with no light and thus very few nutrients that could get down there. So how do animals in the deep sea, like in our Monterey Canyon, get food? One method is that they eat each other, often luring prey or defending against predators with bioluminescence. Or they feed on marine snow. Now, as you can imagine, this marine snow is not frozen water like you would see on land, but it is pieces of biological material. This biological material could be made up of dead organisms, like dead whales or dead phytoplankton or dead anything that you can think of that died in the surface of the water and sinks below the ocean. The other thing that it's made up of is poop. So this marine snow falls and enriches an environment that would otherwise be basically a marine desert. So it falls, so it sinks and falls down from the surface down through the depths. Because there is very little biological material in the deep sea for organisms to eat, features like our Monterey Canyon create almost like a highway for organic, nutrient-rich material to be carried from close to the surface where the mouth of the canyon is, all the way out along the canyon's floor out to where it gets deeper. Now, when I say organic, I don't mean from Whole Foods, I mean carbon-based. So things like dead kelp, and really carbon is the basis of most life forms here on Earth, whether they're made of it or they eat things that have carbon in them, carbon the element. So our deep sea animals in the Monterey Canyon are special because there are many more of them than could be supported by just marine snow or just eating other organisms. And so the Monterey Canyon is a big important source of energy for the organisms in its environment. These range from ocelots, worms that eat bone, often from whale carcasses that fall, to sea cucumbers, sea anemones, tube worms, all kinds of crabs, soft corals, eels, hagfish, siphonophores, comb jellies, and many other interesting creatures. Some of these creatures depend on helpful or symbiotic relationships with other organisms to survive the deep, dark cold of the ocean. The ocelots worms are one example. They have symbiotic bacteria that lives in and around them, and it helps to break down the bone that they burrow into with acid, and it helps them be able to ingest it. Another example, which are in hydrothermal vents, are riftia worms, which have evolved with bacteria that transform sulfide into food that they can eat. But there are chemosynthetic worms that live in the Monterey Canyon. Photosynthetic means that they use light to synthesize energy, and chemosynthetic means they use chemicals to synthesize energy. These live on the walls of the canyon, the steep walls of the canyon, and they feed on chemicals that were already in the soil and sediment and are freed when erosion happens. Just like above ground canyons can be formed by erosion, so too can submarine canyons. And this erosion not only forms the canyon walls, but frees nutrients for these chemosynthetic worms to eat. Another interesting fact about the deep sea is, as you go deeper, red is the first pigment to disappear. How does this affect our deep sea friends? So this means that in order to camouflage, many deep sea creatures are red, which is invisible in the depths of the ocean. Well, that's all for our canyon hiding below the ocean surface in our bay backyard this episode. There is a ton of cool information about Monterey Bay and the research being done below its surface on MBARI's website, as well as at the Monterey Bay Aquarium's website, which has webcams, lots of cool info on deep sea dwelling and other organisms, and even learning courses and crafts. Even if you can't get on a boat or to the beach, I hope that you learned something today and are inspired to continue to explore and learn more about the mysteries of our deep sea bay backyard. Thanks for watching, and tune in next time as we get a little bit closer to the surface. Thanks for watching. Bye!